this and then go, hello and welcome back to Around the Museum with Joe and Diane, where once again we're dealing with the world of dinosaurs and everything like that. And we're sort of going to move into the fringe side of dinosaurs because we're going to be talking about those marine reptiles, which, well, let's start this episode where we started the last episode, which was talking about what is a dinosaur. And in the last episode, we spoke about dinosaur, terrible lizard, as in great lizard. But biologically, what can we define a dinosaur as opposed to the big swimming kind of dinosaurs?
Well, dinosaurs were land-dwelling, air-breathing creatures. Now, there are other sauruses, other words, big reptiles, that are like dinosaurs, but they lived in a different environment. So the classic dinosaurs, T-Rex and that lot, land-dwelling animals, but there are also sauruses that live in the sea.
Yeah, and there's sauruses that fly as well.
Yes, indeed.
So we'll deal more with them in our flight episode.
Yes.
But yes, there's the sauruses of the land, the sauruses of the sea, and the sauruses of the sky. But the dinosauruses, by specific definition, were the land-dwelling ones. But we can go on to talk about some of the sea ones as well. But before we go on to that, I just want to talk a little bit more about that idea of permineralization, because we'll talk more about soft tissue, and that comes into that in another episode. But just talking about the speed that you get fossilized bones, because this is a permeation, if we remember from last week, the permeation of the bones, very, very porous, permeates it with minerals. And one of the standard arguments is that it takes vast periods of time, vast amounts of time to fossilize a dinosaur bone. And this is something which is relatively rejected on the academic level, because you don't have to think very hard about it to realise that you can't have millions of years just to preserve a bone, because you wouldn't have any bone left at the end of it.
Right.
But it is something that is promoted at the layman's level. So you can find in books, in textbooks, in kids' books, but even in like little information leaflets or signs as you go around museums, a common quote is that it takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years for bones to form. So when we're dealing with this process, is it fast or is it slow, and how would we know?
Well, you can actually do an experiment yourself, and we've done that at our Jurassic Ark site. We actually buried some bones just in some sand, because we wanted to show students how to dig up bones. So the best way was to bury some bones and get them to dig them up. And they had a great time. And over the months where we dug up these bones and reburied them, we found that they were starting to become stained with the minerals that were in the ground. They started out as just white bleached bones. They became brown. And we even noticed that they were becoming heavier, sufficiently that when we picked them up, we noticed the weight difference. So we actually set up an experiment where we buried some bones and we left them there for a matter of months. And then we dug them up, and certainly they did feel heavier. We weighed them, but we also sent them off to be chemically analysed. Now, they started off as bleached white bones. A local hunter just gave them to us, so there was nothing in them but bone. Now they definitely had iron and various other minerals actually in the bone.
And this is a process that we're dealing with here. Nothing to do with time, everything to do with the process. And we have some great examples of just how quick that process can be. Case in point, this is from the most recent road trip that I did. And we went to Mother Shipton's, and he's doing a cool sort of, dance move of some description there. This is one of those fossil teddy bears. And you see, it's heavy. It's turned to stone, it's hard. And this is from a place where they get these teddy bears. Teddy bears, of course, are soft and porous, just like the bones are. It's a soft and porous thing which they've hung up underneath a petrifying well. So this is where the water comes out of the rock. It's mostly calcium carbonate, so it's dissolved calcium carbonate in water. Drips onto the teddy bear, into the very porous teddy bear, water comes out, minerals stay behind. And in the case of these Mother Shipton ones, it takes about 3 months, and you end up with a rock-solid teddy bear. Now, a little later, we're going to ask the question, what happens if we cut into this? What would we find in the middle? Would we find soft tissue? And how does that relate to the soft tissue inside dinosaur bones? But that's for another episode. What this shows is that it really is about a process, and that process not only can be quick, most times it needs to be quick, because time is actually your enemy when you're trying to make a fossil. If you get the right process, it happens very quickly. We see evidence of this in the fossils. We see evidence of this with the teddy bear. But it's not a case of if you get the right process, it happens quickly. If you get the wrong process, it takes millions of years. Because if you get the wrong process and you do take millions of years, then you are never going to get a fossil, because time is going to destroy your creature or your organism long before it has a chance to actually fossilize it. So you need the right process. That process must be quick. And so slow fossils just simply don't exist. It doesn't work, right? So you need to have the right process. It's everything to do with process, nothing to do with time. And that's a really key and important point, and we see that with our fossil teddy bear here. So that's a great example of fast fossilization. Well, we've got a few other sort of dinosaur examples here, Diane, and great big Titanosaur sauropod, one of the big sort of long-necked dinosaurs. Again, that's from the Isle of Wight, from an old collection, and just the size of some of these are pretty serious and pretty heavy. I mean, that's got a good lot of weight in that, and you can see all of that beautiful infill. And so really we're dealing with there's actually where your spinal cord would have gone in there. Look. But you can see the kind of the grey, browny beige bits, that's the mineral that's filled up. You know that because it matches the mineral outside of the bone as well. But the black stuff is the actual bone itself. And so when we drill into this, that's when you start to find the stuff that's inside it, and you're able to do your analysis of inside the bone. So it gives you a really good sort of visual picture. Now, a lot of people think that when you dig up a dinosaur, it comes out, you know, in a nice kind of pose or something. And we spoke last episode how a lot of dinosaurs show good evidence of having been drowned, like our big Gorosaurus plaque here. But what I have over here is a big plate of dinosaur bones, or rather saurus bones. These are a type of mosasaur, which is one of those big swimming marine reptiles. And just look at how the bones are. They're just a bit all over the place. So you can probably recognise some of these bones and the bone types. Obviously, these are quite clearly ribs. We've got a little bit of vertebrae here. You can see where they're sort of sitting together. A couple of little limb bones. Probably part of the paddle or whatever. So it's a big accumulation. So we are also looking at a catastrophic dump here. Where it's been sort of smashed.
It's been smashed up and then rolled along, lifted up and then dumped again.
And this is how you would often find the bones. So you often then find them when you're going and digging them up as just random sort of jumbles of bones. And then we have this massive bone, which weighs an absolute ton.
We won't pick that one up.
No, but if you remember back a couple of weeks ago to when we were talking about human bones, and I remember you mentioning there's that, you know, when you can recognise what a joint is, because you have that smooth surface. And I think I'm right in saying, Diane, we've got a similar kind of phenomena with this bone here. If you come up here, can we see that smooth point there? So this will be a joint of some description.
Yes, the same as over here. But this is distinctively smooth. So that's there would be another bone with a rounded end that fitted into that.
Now, this is a part of the limb bone of a big plesiosaur. So this is our plesiosaur type creature, right? The big marine reptile. So again, technically not a dinosaur, but it's part of this big paddle here. So it would have joined up here. That's where this bit would have joined right up near the body. And then the bone would have come down to about there. And then at the end of this bone, you'd have had long finger-like bones, which would have produced the rest of the paddle. So we're clearly dealing with a pretty sizable creature if this is just one limb bone of one paddle, you know. Right. But what I found fascinating is this bit here, because this is actually a part where the creature has broken its bones, but it's actually begun to heal because these bones are actually have begun to fuse and heal in this area. So this is evidence of pain that the poor animal went through, but was able to re-heal. So a good testimony to the design and the healing properties of bone. But what does this tell us about people who would try and claim that God used millions of years of evolution in a very good world?
Well, having a broken bone is not very good. Anyone who has had a broken bone will tell you that it's extremely painful. If the bone actually breaks the surface of the skin, you are in serious danger of an infection which could kill you. So broken bones are not good. And they do cause a lot of pain, and they take a while to heal. So the animal was alive for probably at least months after this injury happened. So this animal was not living in a very good world. This animal was living in a world that was a struggle for existence that Darwin talked about. He talked about the war of nature.
Well, that was even written into his title of his book on the origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favoured races in the struggle for life.
Yes.
It's a picture of a not good world that he's promoting here.
Yes, yes. So it's death, disease and struggle. And in the conclusion to his book, he sums up his view of how things got to be here. And they evolved through a war of nature. So that's definitely not good. And therefore, you've got a real problem if you want to make God the author of that, which is what you're doing if you're saying that God created all of the living things by a process of evolution. Those things are diametrically opposed. You cannot put them together, and they are the most dreadful insult to God's character, because when he looked at the world, it was very good. And all of the things that God describes that are very good do not include pain, death, disease, and struggle. All those things came into the world after human sin and as part of God's judgment. But they are not what God created. God created a very good world, and one day he will create another very good world, and we can look forward to that.
Amen. Amen.
Yes,
and it's amazing how just even little fossils and features like this help to relate it back to that biblical picture, which is directly connected to the gospel itself, in that big picture of the world, created perfection, man sin, good to bad to worse, to glory for all those who've put their trust in Jesus Christ.
Yes, and in fact there are dinosaur bones that have evidence of other disease. They've found dinosaur bones that have bone cancer or evidence of infection of bones. And the other thing is some dinosaur bones even have arthritis.
Yes,
now, you see that in these joint facets that we looked at before. This one is normal, but in some dinosaur bones, you'll see ridges and excrescences where the bone has been damaged and it's started to heal and it's been inflamed. And that happens in human bones as well, in arthritis. Now, anyone who's suffered from arthritis will tell you it's definitely not good.
Yeah, for sure. I know, it runs in my family. But yes, and so it's really important to get that biblical perspective.
Yes.
Well, we're going to stick along for the moment, Diane, about the theme of these marine reptiles, these marine creatures. Just briefly pointing out, we've got our Archaeopteryx here, which I've currently controversially put in the dinosaur section of the museum because a lot of people associate this with dinosaurs. But we're going to leave that because we're going to talk about feathered dinosaurs and stuff in a completely separate episode. But we'll come back to Archaeopteryx then. But for now, we're going to stick to these great big marine creatures, these big marine dinosaurs, for want of a better word. So, as actually we've got some giant examples of these and some really important examples of these downstairs. So, why don't we we'll come down together and go and see them?
Yes. Okay.
So here we are down here, Diane. We've got some of our big giant ones, and these are out in the front of the museum, so people can come and see them all the time.
That's right.
Our other big ones. So we've got two of our main fossils inside, but a couple of casts as well. And we like to have some casts of things that we're not going to get hold of otherwise.
No, that's right. But they're still accurate as to what was found. So.
Yes, very much so. But let's deal with the real ones first. So you can see we've got a giant Mosasaurus skull on this side, and here we've got a Haliosaurus skull. Both of these are types of mosasaurids, the big marine swimming creatures, a bit like a sort of giant crocodile type creature. But you can see the sign we've put up there, the sea dragon. What's that a reference to?
Well, that's a reference to so-called swimming dinosaurs. So again, big reptiles. And big reptiles are reminiscent of dragons, so hence the term sea dragons.
And that was a term that was used.
A general term for large swimming reptiles, yes.
It was used when they first started exploring and digging up these creatures as well. The people like Thomas Hawkins, who had the Hawkins collection, a lot of which is now on display in the Natural History Museum in London. he brought most of his collections off of the famous Victorian fossil hunter Mary Anning, and so he ended up then donating it to Richard Owen and the Natural History Museum. And you can go there today and see the great big gallery and see Sea Dragon written in on the big slabs themselves.
Yes.
Exactly, yes. So amazing stuff. So this is from Morocco, and one of the things that's fascinating about the location where it's from, the sort of Kem area region in Morocco, is that it's often referred to as being hundreds of times more abundant than normal marine sediment, right? In other words, you go there and you find shark teeth and dinosaurs and mosasaurs and all sorts of stuff. And the standard interpretation in a lot of these sites is that you have these creatures living, dying, and getting buried where they were living. In other words, the argument is that these rock formations are a representation of an ecosystem or life on Earth. Now, there's a couple of problems with that. The first one is that, well, the reality is this is not a record of life, this is a record of death.
Yes, that's right.
Because that's one thing that everybody agrees with. These creatures are dead.
Yes.
Right? So there's no arguing with that. So it's a record of death, but the fact that when you start to get down into it and look at it, it doesn't match any kind of ecosystem that we know. It's a bit like the drowned dinosaurs, where you have the dinosaurs buried with land plants, trees, buried with fish, buried with deep sea creatures. We don't know of the environment that combines land plants, deep sea creatures and dinosaurs all together, other than a flooding event, right?
Yes.
And it's the same with this, because you're dealing with a sediment, which is a phosphorus limestone, which is hundreds of times more abundant than normal marine sediment. So something clearly is going on here that's different. And when you begin to match that up with the fact that you do have all of these land plants and sea creatures and mixed environments, it's really indicative of what kind of an event.
Well, an enormous flood, like a tsunami, like a tidal wave, where a huge mass of water has just lifted up a whole lot of sediment, mixed it around, and then dumped it very quickly, because these are huge. So in order to preserve them, they have to be very deeply without oxygen. In a lot of sediment.
And pressure comes into it as well. And you can see the pressure in this skull here, because it's all crushed and smushed. And the odd, the jaws have basically been folded in on each other. The top part of the jaw, the skull, has been kind of squished in on it. So it's definitely a catastrophic burial. In fact, very recently, just a couple of days ago, we had some new updates from our team in Australia, where they've been experimenting with fossil making and putting stuff under pressure, toad and fern and roach, putting it under pressure, under hydraulic pressure in the clay, and producing effectively carbonised fossils almost within just a few hours of experimentation. So it's definitely a fast process, as well as it is that process. It needs to have the right conditions, needs to have the right pressure. Like you say, it needs to be buried quickly, deeply, without the presence of oxygen, all in one place, in order to actually preserve it. And you can tell that it's fragile, because you can see how it's completely covered in this kind of plaster jacket, which is completely covering up the back, which is how it's been excavated out. When you're excavating, you cover it in order to preserve it and look after it. So it's still fragile, and you kind of think, if it really is this fragile, how did it last all these millions of years?
Yes, that's right. Yes, it's absurd, really.
Yeah.
From what we know about how things last. And if you bury something in the garden and come back and dig it up, a year or two later, how much of it is left?
Yeah, not a lot. Well, let's just have a look down here then for a moment, because we've got another cast down here. If you want to grab that side for me, we'll lift it up onto the top here. So I'll hold it here. Now, this is a cast, but it's a very, very well done cast of an ichthyosaur. In fact, the first ichthyosaur that was ever found, which was found by Mary Anning, who's, we had a convention down to Mary Anning's
we did.
Place last year. So where did she come from?
Yes, that was down on the Jurassic coast, down near the island of Portland. We had a wonderful time, and we found lots of interesting fossils, lots of ammonites, and but that area is famous for these particular fossils, these marine dinosaurs.
And we even found a good bit of ichthyosaur skeleton as well,
yes.
which we're waiting to get cleaned up and repaired. But you can see it's a rather beautiful creature, and this sort of kind of, it's a reptile, but sort of more dolphin-like creature than crocodile or anything else. And not in this particular specimen. This is the original Mary Anning specimen, or cast of the original Mary Anning specimen. But these have been found in Jurassic rocks all over the world, including some of the original Jurassic rocks in Germany. What's some of the fascinating things that have been found with these ichthyosaurs, which really shout for rapid burial? Some of the features that they have.
Well, some of them actually have babies with them. And there is a classic one that you can go and see in the Natural History Museum that is usually labelled as ichthyosaur giving birth. Now, it may have just been that it was squashed and the developing babies were extruded, but at the same time, however much it happened, it had to happen quickly.
Yeah, and you'll find that with a lot of things. It's like you'll find a lot of like fish swallowing a fish where they're most likely actually being squashed and regurgitated because of that amount of pressure. These fossils are effectively flat and they're squashed. There's only so many ways you can kind of squash bones, but even these you can see they've been under pressure enough to be able to kind of bend them sideways, and the ribs are all broken and the odd thing has been squished and broken out. But certainly all the soft material, the soft tissue, the skin and the guts, that's been squashed. And you do find gut content inside them sometimes. You do find, as you say, babies inside them, most likely being squashed out as well. But is that a completely unique phenomenon to ichthyosaurs, the sort of the being reptiles and developing babies inside of them?
No, they're actually plesiosaurs that the same thing has happened to, which are another type of swimming dinosaur or swimming reptile. But yes, we find internal gut contents in land-dwelling dinosaurs as well. So it's not all that unusual. And these days, now that we have lots of scanning techniques where we can look inside of fossils without actually destroying them, we're finding more and more internal structure inside fossils.
And that is an area of science which is really, really exploding recently with that kind of stuff. So we look forward to discussing that more in a future episode. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful creature as well, really. And discovered by a lady who, at a time when being a woman in science was not the easiest thing, at a time when there was really a lot of changes going on with regards to what people thought about the Bible and what people thought about creation. This is the time of William Buckland and Charles Lyell and all of these groups of people. And really Mary Anning, as the original fossil hunter and discoverer, and actually got to know the area so well that she took the experts, then took them on field trips to show the area. It's something that she stayed strong in her faith. There's a lot of evidence that she stayed strong in her faith throughout her life. So we can be grateful for the testimony of Mary Anning, the Victorian fossil hunter, as well. But yeah, just amazing and beautiful stuff, and great evidence of rapid burial as well, and from the original Jurassic rocks too. So some great pieces of evidence there. Let's take that and pop that just down here, and there we go. Let's just talk about one or two more things. You can see we've got our dinosaur display here, which we have on sort of downstairs, and we've got a few different sort of examples, including some more of those eggs there as well, which is great, and those footprints, and in particular, we're just going to talk about one last little aspect, which is this bone down here, Diane, because this is another saurus. But it's not a saurus that most people would actually recognise as such. This is actually from a Jurassic crocodile. It's a vertebrate, backbone, and we've done some tests on it and taken some samples from it. But crocodiles, why am I calling crocodiles a saurus?
Well, crocodiles are reptiles, and in the classification system, in the scientific classification system, they are called archosaurs, meaning ancient sauruses. And in the evolutionary timetable, crocodiles supposedly evolved before dinosaurs, but somehow survived them because they're still living and doing very well in Australia at the moment.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, so genuine sauruses, but in a different scientific classification to dinosaurs, but big reptiles.
Big reptiles.
Yes.
So, so still the sources, but again, no evidence for evolution, certainly are
No,
fossils.
the oldest ones are recognisably crocodiles, just like the ones that swim in the rivers in the Northern Territory in Australia. Yes.
So there you go. Not quite a dinosaur, but still good evidence against evolution and good evidence for rapid burial. And yes, we have been doing tests on this bone as well with regards to that soft tissue stuff, which we'll discuss next time. So great stuff. Anyway, Diane, if people want to find out more about these kind of fossils and dinosaurs, and obviously we recommend they come on a field trip, which we hold all over the world. But where can people find out more about when these field trips are happening and more about the kind of fossils and research and stuff that Creation Research does?
Probably best to start with our main website, and that will link you to other things. So start with creationresearch.net, that's easy to remember, creationresearch.net. And if you would like to see some of our videos, go to our YouTube channel, fantastic stuff there. You can buy some of our classic videos that we've made. We have made a couple on dinosaurs. Some of them are free to stream. And
available on our YouTube channel, so go and check that out.
Yes. We keep a watching brief on the scientific news, and of course dinosaurs are always popular, so they get regularly reported. So we write about those in our newsletter. That gets archived onto a website called the Fact File. You don't need to know when they were sent out in the newsletter. They're archived as separate items, so you can just go to that, do a keyword search, and you'll find all sorts of interesting things about dinosaurs, about fossils, about rapid burial, and multiple mixed fossils, just like we looked at upstairs. So fascinating things. And we have a printed newsletter which also includes a lot of photographs of some of our field trips and some of our research, like the research that we did with making fossils ourselves, with putting things in clay under pressure. We report that in our printed newsletter, which goes out as a PDF as well if you don't live in Australia.
So check out all of those sites, Creation Fact File and our UK sites YouTube channel, but it all starts at creationresearch.net, where you can find links to all of the research, including many, many different accounts and documentation of our museum projects as well, and fossils and artefacts that are inside there. So good place to start. Well, we'll see you next week as we carry on around the museum and exploring more fascinating pieces of evidence that God really did create as he said he did, that there really was a judgment in a global flood, and that wonderful message that we get in Psalm 119 verse 160, thy word, God's word, is true from the very beginning. So do join us next time. We'll see you there.
Check out Creation Research Live, our all-new streaming service for creation research, with thousands of free resources and access to all of Creation Research's premium documentaries, debates and presentations through a low-cost monthly subscription. Find out more at creationresearch.live. Got questions? We've got answers. Check out askjohnmackay.com to see Q&A articles by experts from around the world. See also the creationfactfile.com website for latest evidence news from Creation Research. Watch Creation Research TV, a live 24/7 broadcast of everything Creation Research, available for free on our YouTube channel and through Creation Research Live. Be sure to sign up to the Creation Evidence News. Regular updates and news from the world of creation research, science, and the latest evidence for creation. Why not visit one of the many creation research museums around the globe? Find out more at creationresearch.net.